The morning my mother's will was read, everyone in that room already assumed they knew how it would end. My brother had built his life around that assumption. So had most of our relatives. And honestly, for a long time, so had I. My mother had owned a modest but tidy detached home in Barrie, Ontario. The kind of house that had good bones and a leaky eaves trough and a garden she tended every spring until she couldn't anymore. She also had a savings account, an RRSP, that had grown steadily for 30 years, and a small rental property in Collingwood that my brother had managed on her behalf for the last 6 years. By the time she passed, her estate was worth somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000, depending on how the rental property was assessed. That was the number everyone kept circling in their heads. I know because people told me, in the weeks between her death and the reading of the will, that I should prepare myself. That the rental property alone would likely go to my brother. That the Barrie house was old and would need work. That I should be realistic. I never thought to argue with any of that. My name is Sandra. I'm 38 years old, and I've been a social worker in Simcoe County for 11 years. My brother Owen is 44. He's an account manager at a mid-sized commercial real estate firm in Vaughan. He drives a leased BMW, sends his kids to private school in Newmarket, and has, for as long as I can remember, worn the kind of confidence that comes from always believing the room was built for you. We grew up in that Barrie house. The same house everyone was now quietly writing off. My mother's name was Diane. She was 71 when she died, and she spent the last 4 years of her life managing a progressive neurological condition that slowly took her ability to drive, then to cook, then eventually to live alone without help. My brother flew in from Vaughan twice during those 4 years. Once for her 68th birthday, once when her doctor recommended we start discussing care options as a family. Both visits lasted a weekend. He flew back Sunday night each time. I drove to Barrie every Thursday. I spent most Saturday mornings there. I took 2 weeks of vacation time in the second year to stay with her after a fall that bruised her hip and shook her confidence badly. I accompanied her to physiotherapy in Orillia, to specialist appointments at Royal Victoria, to a support group for people with her condition that met in the basement of a United Church on Dunlop Street. I learned how to adjust her medications schedule when her neurologist made changes. I learned what she could and couldn't eat as her swallowing became more complicated. I learned how she liked her tea. Not too hot, with a small amount of whole milk, never skim, because that was the kind of thing that mattered to her, and so it mattered to me. None of this made me special. She was my mother. I loved her. I stayed because staying was what I was supposed to do. But I want to be honest about something. It was hard. It was relentlessly, quietly hard in the way that caregiving always is. Not dramatic, not heroic, just a long accumulation of Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings and phone calls at 10:30 at night, when she was confused about her medications or frightened by something she couldn't name. My own social life narrowed. A relationship I'd been in ended, partly because my partner at the time eventually said that he felt like he came third in my life, after my mother and my job, and he wasn't wrong. I didn't fight it. I didn't have the energy to fight it. Owen called her every Sunday, sometimes every other Sunday. He was good on the phone, chatty, warm, the kind of son who could make her laugh for 20 minutes. After they hung up, she'd tell me with genuine pride what he was up to. How his firm had just landed a new client. How his youngest had made the hockey rep team. I smiled and I meant it. I wasn't angry at him then. I was just tired. When she died on a Tuesday morning in early February, peacefully at home, which was what she had wanted, I was the one who was there. I had been staying over for the week because her condition had worsened noticeably in January. Owen sent flowers that arrived Wednesday. They were beautiful. Hydrangeas. She would have liked them. The weeks afterward moved strangely. There was the funeral to arrange, which I handled mostly on my own, with the help of my mother's closest friend, a woman named Bev, who had known her since their children were in primary school together. There was the estate to begin sorting. Old furniture, Decades of accumulated belongings, a life compressed into a semi-detached in Barrie. I started quietly. I didn't rush. Owen arrived in town the Thursday before the will reading. He stayed at a hotel downtown rather than the house, which surprised me less than it probably should have. He took me to dinner at a restaurant on Dunlop Street. A nice one, the kind with a wine list. And over that dinner he told me, in the careful voice of someone who has rehearsed the conversation, that he hoped we could handle the estate maturely, that Mum had clearly relied on him to manage the Collingwood property for years, and that represented real investment of his time and professional expertise. That he assumed the distribution would reflect that. I didn't say much. I ordered the salmon. I drove home. The will reading took place on a Friday afternoon in the offices of my mother's solicitor, a deliberate and unhurried man named Mr. Beaumont, whose office was near the waterfront and smelled faintly of old paper and good coffee. There were perhaps 8 of us gathered. Myself, Owen, Owen's wife Tara, my aunt from Sudbury, 2 of my mother's cousins who I barely knew, and Bev, who had been asked to attend as a witness to the will's preparation. Tara sat very close to Owen. My aunt caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, careful smile that seemed to be trying to communicate something she didn't want to say out loud. I had the impression everyone had already done the math. Mr. Beaumont settled into his chair, opened the file, and began. The Collingwood rental property, he read, would pass to Owen in full recognition of his management role over the preceding years. Several relatives exchanged glances. Owen sat back in his chair and nodded slightly, the way people nod when they're confirming something they already expected. The RRSP and savings accounts, the liquid assets, the actual money, would also pass to Owen. The room was very still. Tara touched Owen's arm. He didn't look at me. The Barrie house, Mr. Beaumont continued, would pass to Sandra. Owen turned to look at me then, and he smiled. Not a mean smile exactly, more like a smile of mild pity. He leaned slightly toward Tara and said, just loud enough for the table to hear, "She spent every weekend scrubbing her floors for a house that'll need $60,000 in renos before anyone will touch it." Tara made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh or discomfort. A couple of relatives looked away. Bev, sitting at the far end of the table, went very still. Then Owen looked directly at me. "At least you got something for your time, I guess." He let a beat pass. Then, although honestly, all those Thursdays, I'm not sure the math works out. The room went cold. Someone shifted in their chair. My aunt's expression did something complicated. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure I could speak. Mr. Beaumont, who had been watching all of this with the composed patience of someone who has sat through many difficult family moments, allowed a brief silence. Then he cleared his throat. "There is," he said, "one additional matter your mother asked me to address. She was quite specific that it be presented after the primary distribution was announced." Owen blinked. "What additional matter?" Mr. Beaumont reached into his file and removed a second envelope, the kind you'd find at a stationery shop. Cream-colored, personals, sealed with a small sticker that had dried and come slightly loose with time. My mother's handwriting was on the front. It said simply, "For the family, from Diane. Your mother prepared this letter approximately 14 months ago," Mr. Beaumont said. "She asked that I read it in full." I pressed my hands flat against my thighs under the table. He broke the seal. "Dear Owen and Sandra, and anyone else who loves me enough to be in this room today, I hope the fact that you're all together means you're being kind to each other. I know that's a lot to ask of families, especially at moments like this. But I'm asking anyway, because that's the kind of mother I was. First, Owen, I want you to know that I am proud of you. You built something real. You worked hard. Managing the Collingwood property was never a small thing, and I want it acknowledged. I saw how much you gave to your work, to your family, to the version of success that matters to you. That is not nothing. That property is yours because you earned a portion of it, and because I want you to have something tangible from me." Several people relaxed visibly. Owen nodded again, more slowly this time. "But I need to say something now that I've been thinking about for a long time. There is a particular kind of love that doesn't make noise. It doesn't post about itself. It doesn't arrive with a suitcase full of good intentions twice a year and call it presents. It shows up on a Thursday evening when it's -15 outside and there are no awards for being there. And it comes back the following Thursday, and the one after that. Owen, you were a wonderful son on the phone. I cherished our Sunday calls. I truly did. But I want to be honest with you, and I think honesty is more respectful than comfortable silence. You were not there. Not in the way that Sandra was there. And I don't say that to wound you. I say it because I need you to understand what your sister carried, and to respect it, not to diminish it. The room was completely silent. Owen had gone very still. Sandra never asked me what she would receive. She never once, in 4 years of Thursdays, made me feel like a burden she was calculating. She held my hand at appointments. She figured out how to communicate with my neurologist in a language I could understand. She was there the morning I fell, and the morning I came home, and every hard morning in between. She gave me years of her life in small, unremarked increments, and I was aware of every single one. I was crying. I didn't realize it until I felt it. This is why I made a separate decision, apart from the will you've just heard. 14 months ago, I contacted the city of Barrie directly regarding the property on Ardagh Road. I had received correspondence, unsolicited, from the city's development planning office, inquiring about the potential long-term availability of the property and the land on which it sits. As some of you may know, the city has been expanding its residential planning corridors southward, and the Ardagh Road parcel falls within a designated future development zone. Owen leaned forward. His expression had changed. I engaged a property consultant, independently, without mentioning it to either of my children. And the assessment conducted 14 months ago estimated the land value, separate from the house structure, at between $680,000 and $720,000, contingent on rezoning confirmation. I was subsequently approached with a formal purchase offer from a development group, which I declined at the time. However, I instructed Mr. Beaumont to retain documentation of all correspondence and assessments, and to present this information to Sandra upon the reading of the will, as it pertains to her inherited property. The silence in that room was unlike any silence I have ever sat inside. Tara said very quietly, "What?" Owen said nothing. His jaw was working slightly, like he was trying to find the beginning of a sentence and couldn't locate it. Mr. Beaumont set the letter down for a moment and reached into his briefcase. He removed a folder, thicker than I expected, and placed it on the table. "The documentation your mother referenced," he said. "City planning correspondence, the independent land assessment, and a letter of continued interest from the development group dated 6 weeks ago, indicating the offer remains open." Owen picked up the folder before I could. He opened it. He turned pages. I watched his face move through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, calculation, disbelief. Something that might have been the beginning of anger before it ran out of fuel. "The assessment on the house structure," Mr. Beaumont continued, "accounts for approximately $290,000 in the current market. The land value assessment, which your mother commissioned, brings the total estimated value of the property to somewhere between $970,000 and $1.1 million, depending on rezoning outcomes." He folded his hands. The Collingwood rental property, by comparison, was assessed at $385,000 in last year's municipal evaluation. My aunt made a sound like she'd forgotten how to breathe. One of my mother's cousins said, very softly, "Oh my." Bev, at the far end of the table, was looking at her hands. But she was smiling, quietly and privately and entirely to herself, the way someone smiles when they know the end of a story before it's been told. Owen put the folder down. He looked at me. The confidence that had walked into that room with him. The certainty, the pity, the offhand cruelty of all those Thursdays, I'm not sure the math works out, was simply gone. I don't know where it went. I only know it wasn't there anymore. Mr. Beaumont picked up the letter again. "Sandra, I need you to know something. I didn't leave you the house as a consolation. I left you the house because I trust you with it, not because of the land, and not because of what any development group might offer you. I left it to you because you know how to make decisions from a place of love, and not from a place of fear or greed. And that is the only person I would trust with something that was mine. Whatever you decide to do with it, whether you keep it, whether you sell it, whether you sit on the back porch for another 30 years the way I did, I know it will be the right decision. Because you have always known how to value what actually matters. The property consultant's name and contact information are in Mr. Beaumont's file. So is the development group's letter. Do with it what feels right. I love you both. Please be good to each other. That is the only inheritance that can't be assessed. Mum. Mr. Beaumont folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. He slid it across the table to me without a word. I held it in both hands. The cream paper was soft. Her handwriting on the front looked exactly like it always had. Slightly slanted, a little hurried, the way she always wrote when she was trying to get the words down before she lost them. Owen had not moved. Tara was whispering something to him that I couldn't hear. His face had settled into an expression I had never quite seen on him before. Not anger, not embarrassment, something more private and harder to name. Something like the look on a person's face when they realized they were so certain they were right, that they never stopped to question whether they might not be. My aunt touched my arm gently across the table and didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The relatives filed out slowly. There were a few quiet conversations near the door, the kind that stop when someone approaches. Bev waited until nearly everyone had gone, then walked around to my side of the table and sat down in the chair next to mine. She planned this, I said. It wasn't a question. I know, Bev said. She told me about the land assessment last spring. She said she wanted Owen to hear the house part first. She paused. She wanted him to have a full minute to enjoy it. I laughed. It surprised me. It was the first time I'd laughed since she died, and it came out rough and a little watery, but it was real. Owen stopped me in the car park outside. He'd sent Tara ahead to the car. He looked like he'd aged slightly since entering the building that afternoon, and I don't mean that unkindly. I mean he looked more like a person and less like a performance. Sandra, he said. Then he stopped. He tried again. I didn't know about the land. I know you didn't, I said. I shouldn't have said what I said in there. About the math. He looked away toward the waterfront. There was ice still at the edges of the lake. I wasn't. He stopped again. Owen, I said. I know. We stood there for a moment in the cold. A gull went over. The wind off the bay was sharp and February real, and it smelled, faintly and inexplicably, like her. Or maybe that was just memory doing what memory does. He nodded once. He walked to his car. I watched him go. I didn't feel triumphant standing there. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't sure what I felt, exactly. Relief, maybe, and grief, always grief, and something underneath both of those that I didn't have a clean word for. Like being understood, finally, by someone who could no longer be thanked for it. I drove back to the house on Ardagh Road. I let myself in with the key I had never given back. I stood in the front hallway for a while, just standing the way you do in spaces that hold people you've lost. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the herbal tea she'd switched to when coffee became too much for her stomach. Her calendar was still on the fridge. February was still showing. She hadn't lived long enough to flip it. I sat down at the kitchen table where I had sat every Thursday for 4 years. The chair was slightly wobbly on the left leg, the same as it had always been. I had meant to fix it, and she had always waved me off and said, it was fine. She knew which way to lean. I kept the property consultant's number in my jacket pocket for 3 weeks before I called. When I finally did, the conversation confirmed what Mr. Beaumont's file had outlined. The rezoning process was moving forward, and the development group's interest was genuine and current. The offer they ultimately put forward, in writing, was just over $1 million for the land and structure combined. I'm still thinking about it. My mother said to do what feels right. I'm trying to figure out what that is. Some mornings, I sit at that kitchen table and I can't imagine not having the key. Other mornings, I think about what she actually meant, that the house was never the point. The point was the Thursday evenings, the specialist appointments, the medication schedule, the tea made exactly right. The point was being present for a life, not just showing up for the end of it. That's not something that can be assessed. She knew that. She said it, in her own handwriting, on cream stationery from a shop on Dunlop Street, in words I will read again many times in the years ahead. She cared more about what I understood than what I inherited. And in the end, because she was my mother and she knew me, she made sure I received both.